I think this episode just confirmed that Lumon is producing clones. And if you're one of the people who suspected Helly of being her Audi version Eleanor Egan, as opposed to her any version of Helly R, high five and pat yourself on the back. You are a real fan of the show. Since the only and biggest clue we got this entire season was a quick catch it or miss it moment back in episode 2 when everyone was coming into work and going in the elevator, and we heard a ding for every single member of the Refiners except when it came to Helly. We didn't hear anything until this episode. But before we dive too deep into that, I want to focus on Irving real quick, because he played the most important role in this episode and he deserves a moment of silence for the huge sacrifice that he made this episode. The episode starts off pretty much the same way it ended, with Irving in the cold abyss all alone, which in itself is interesting because the very nature of this episode was about twins, clones, and duality. But the opening and closing shots of this episode are of a cold, isolated nothingness as Irving fades in and out of existence, which I think is all part of Lumon's plans when it comes to why they're out there. My man, Mr. Milchek, did promise the Refiners that there would be some reforms, and he stuck to his word. And one of those reforms was this very retreat, an outdoor retreat team building occurrence, aka an Earth Bowl for short, where they have to find the fourth appendix of Kira Egan's and follow in its memories, where he talks about his own twin brother that no one knew about. And as weird as all that sounds, it gets weirder, because while they're looking for his fourth appendix, they are helped by clones or doppelgangers of themselves, guiding them on the right path. And we see one for each and every member of the Refiners, starting with Mark, going to Helly, and then we eventually see Irv and Dylan's clones, copies, doppelgangers, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's during this whole ordeal that Irving really starts to suspect Helly R isn't who she says she is. Not only because he puts the pieces together to understand that if Lumon could make clones of them, they could also infiltrate the severed floor or have someone in there who isn't severed. But the main giveaway was the fact that Helly's jokes were mean, as opposed to the first season where they were just sarcastic without any of the venom. And that's really what gave it away. And just like Irvin was able to tell that wasn't Helly R, I'm able to tell that some of you guys haven't subscribed yet, so please click that subscribe button. When Irvin confronted Helly and told her that, it immediately made me think of all the encounters we've had with Helly R this season. While I wouldn't say I found her particularly mean at any point, I did find her just odd. The main example I can think of is what I said in my last video, how Helly was acting weird in the hallway with Mark. Instead of going in for the kiss like she did in the season 1 finale, this version of Helly was more hesitant, more restrained. It was just Mark and her in the hallway, and she didn't go for it. She was being, the only word I can describe it is weird. The semen joke is what really got Irv to start thinking about her humor and looking at her slightly differently. After Mr. Milchek reads to them over a campfire, like this show, when you think it can't get any weird, you have Mr. Milchek essentially reading them a ghost story, and it ends up a jizz story. By the way, before I continue, can I mention how whatever they're doing with Miss Hung is gotta be illegal? Forget child labor laws, but the fact that they have her cooking dinner over an open flame in the middle of a cold tundra, it's gotta be illegal somewhere. But back to the story. Once Mr. Milchek reads the vivid description that Kira Egan gave about his own twin brother, which is tying us back into the themes of duplicates, twins, clones, or doppelgangers that we mentioned earlier, he described how his brother pretty much died or was liquefied. It was graphic, and if I'm being 100, Helly was right. It did sound like he was jizzing, but it's here we see the difference in ideals when it comes to what's funny and what isn't between Helly and Irving, and that's what lights the light bulb in his head. Because Helly's joke really wasn't funny, even though Mark was fake laughing, but we know why he was doing that. Mark was just trying to score some brownie points. But that joke prompted Milchek to storm off angrily after burning up their marshmallows. And I think Mr. Milchek took it personally because of the paintings and pictures he received last episode. Think about it. If Helly is right and the story is about jizz, Mr. Milchek knows she's right because he knows that that's actually Eleanor Egan and not Helly R. So that means in Milchek's mind, they saw him as Kira Egan with those pictures, and in his head, They saw him as a brother jizzer. But once Mr. Milchek leaves though, Irving confronts Helly in front of Mark and Dylan, and she dodges his question again. And this time she's very mean about her comments when it comes to him and Bert. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not mad at her. Even though she's deflecting, she does have a point, but that also causes Irving to storm off in the middle of the night. And I'm not even gonna really get into the dream that Irving had while he got lost in the snow, but I will say this, I think that it was just him making peace with his existence. The few things that he found there, the MDR computers, Bert, and a weird kinship that he had with Kira Egan and his experiences, which is why he saw that little creature girl. So while Irving was getting intimate with his fantasies, Mark and Helly were getting intimate like how you're supposed to be on a magnificent camping trip sponsored by the company you work for on their dime. So they share an intimate moment where they have sex, and Helly reveals to Mark that she was ashamed of her Audi life. While she doesn't flat out say what she saw, she told him how she felt. And this gives us a deep dive into Helly's psyche like we've never gotten before. When Helly is her Audi form, aka Eleanor, she comes off as cold, rigid, and in charge. We already knew that really wasn't the case since we saw her father call her a fetid moppet, but for her to vocalize this, it allowed us to see that she is ashamed of herself and only wants to make her father proud by completing this whole Cold Harbor mission. But to Mark, Helly is just confiding into him. But to us, the audience, we end up knowing exactly how she feels because we end up finding out exactly who she is at the end. Now we get to the end, where Irving decides to follow Helly and confront her one final time. This time though, he makes sure to call Mr. Milchek before he attempts to kill her, unless Mr. Milchek can bring back the any Helly are. Mr. Milchek wasn't going to do it. Like I've said before, Mr. Milchek is the perfect company man, and he's going to follow protocol until the very end. But when Irving is serious and he's about to kill Eleanor, she tells him to do it. Before Irving kills her, Mr. Milchek pulls out his walkie-talkie and says to remove the glass globe block. And that's when we finally hear the elevator bell ding and any Helly R is back. I think Irv did this because of Mark. If we think about how he's been behaving this entire episode, he was watching Mark make googly eyes all episodes and didn't want Mark to lose his love to Lumon just like Irving lost his love Bert to Lumon, which in itself is somewhat poetic and romantic, a self-sacrifice in the name of love, but also Irving played his part in unraveling the mystery of Helly R at the cost of his own life, because Mr. Milchek kills Irv in the worst way possible, by total deletion. While his Audi will still be alive, the fact that he deleted every trace of Irving B from ever working at Lumon, and only then will he awaken Irving's Audi, putting any Irving B to sleep forever is a fate I think that is worse than death, if we're being honest. He ceases to exist from existence, kind of like the Thanos snap, but instead of physically dying, it's more of a consciousness. There is no soul, there is no consciousness, you are gone. But I don't think we've seen the last of Irving for two reasons. One, his Audi is still investigating Lumon, but not just because he's investigating in Lumon, but Bert G is also investigating his Audi as well. And I feel like we need to have that spy versus spy, Irving versus Bert play out. And that's something that his Audi is gonna play a part of, because Irving's Audi has been researching Lumon as far back as we can remember. Before the other refiners actually started getting suspicious about Lumon, we know that Irv has a vendetta, and his Innie and Audi's mind kind of blend in together, almost like how Mark's mind was working after reintegration, blending in and out of the two memories. So I do think he'll be back. But secondly, if what we're saying about clones are true, along with what they did to Miss Casey, then Irving will definitely be back, because I don't think Lumon just lets you leave just like that. Especially after Irving blew their cover and nearly killed an Egan. It wasn't just Helly R that he almost killed. He almost killed Eleanor Egan and blew the whistle on what they were doing in front of the other refiners. And also, the psychological effect that this has got to have on Mark, the fact that the person he slept with, even though it was Helly physically, it wasn't her mentally. So Mark, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, Mark is the man. His wife, Helly R, the woman he was going on a date with in the first season, and now Eleanor Egan. This man is a Chad personified. But guys, That's just my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode in the comment section below. Did you like this episode? Tell me what you think about it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. But if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.